All right, thank you, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to keep my hand on the podium so that I don't step forward and leap off the stage by accident. So this will keep me anchored. For those of you in the front row, I'm glad. Yeah, I know you're glad. So I'm going to be speaking today about the importance and challenges of socializing when you're experiencing vision loss. And I'm going to be speaking wearing two different hats. One as an employee and representative of CNIB, and another as someone with vision loss. I'm here, I have very little sight, and I'm here with my guide dog, Kaya. And so I'm going to be starting just from my heart to yours as a fellow person with vision loss, sharing some of my thoughts and ideas and experiences with you. And you may have had similar experiences, or maybe you're going to say, no, that's not how it was for me. But my hope is that whatever it is that I share today, you'll find it helpful in some way. So we know that connection is really, really important. It's important for everyone. It's why we're here. We're wired to connect with one another. And the quality of our connections, how supportive and how meaningful our connections are, our social connections, really impacts our life, our overall well-being. Research has shown that when we have good, strong connections, we're healthier, we're happier, we live longer, and we just generally flourish and are much more successful in life. For example, people who have a regular sort of group to get together with, a social group, just informal or formal social group, when they can count on that regular social contact, they are, research has shown that they're happier. The increase in their happiness is equivalent to as though they were earning an extra $100,000 per year. And since my wage apparently isn't going to be going up in 100 grand this year, maybe next year, it's a great investment to get together with a group of friends on a regular basis. Also, we know that stress actually promotes us to be social. So this is a good thing, because I don't know about you, but sometimes for me, losing my sight has been a very stressful experience. And I had normal sight until I was 8, at which point I became legally blind, and then for the past 30 some odd years, my vision has continued to deteriorate. So, it's been a constant adapting to, losing sight. And so through that stress, your body actually has a built-in mechanism to release hormones that promote social connection. A lot of you maybe have heard of oxytocin. Has anybody heard of oxytocin? And what oxytocin is best known for is that it's like a cuddle hormone. It makes you want to connect with people. You get nice, cozy, and warm feelings with oxytocin. But what a lot of people don't realize is that oxytocin is a stress hormone. Our bodies release oxytocin when we're in stress. It's just as much as part of the stress response as like adrenaline. And so we release this in order that we reach out. It makes us crave social contact, physical contact. And then when we actually do make that contact, we produce more oxytocin, and it's very good for our bodies. It actually helps to sort of provide us with very healthful protective effects against some of the more negative impacts of stress on our bodies. And it even repairs our hearts, which may have encountered or experienced damage due to the stress response. So it's this built-in mechanism that our body knows, when you're going through a difficult time, it's important to be surrounded by people who support you. So that's all good. So we know it's great to be connected. When we go through stress, our bodies, help us get connected. The challenge is that there are some very unique things about vision loss that actually present obstacles to becoming connected. And so I'm going to just sort of explore those a little bit, because it's really important to know what the challenge is, not so that you can feel all discouraged, but so when you know what the problem is, it starts to give you ideas of how to find the solution around it, a way around it. So one of the challenges, of course, to staying socially connected, being socially connected when you are experiencing vision loss, is that 70% or even more of communication is visual. Probably different people you've heard different stats over the years. So it's somewhere, quite high. I've heard as high as 90%, but I've also heard more recently about 70% is communication is very, very visual. And for those of you who have had sight and who have lost it, you may, find it more awkward or difficult to know what people are meaning, because you're so used to seeing like the physical gestures and expressions and things that go along with communication, and it can leave you sort of disoriented and a little bit shaky and sort of feeling vulnerable, because you're like, I'm finding it a little bit more difficult to socialize with ease. The other thing, and this is kind of me just talking personally here, when I first lost my sight, I was only 8, I was, just a kid, but the very first emotion I remember having wasn't fear or anger, although I did experience those things eventually as well. It was embarrassment. I was really embarrassed. I was ashamed to have anybody know that I couldn't see. And the research shows that shame is actually the fear of disconnection. It's the fear of feeling as though perhaps somebody's going to learn something about you that they're going to reject you. And so you tend to try to hide certain things about yourself so that, they won't find this out and then I won't be rejected. And more recent research has shown that probably the reason why we have this kind of shame response, it goes back to, again, very sort of primordial things. And it's evident in non-vertebrate or invertebrates, in reptiles and in mammals. And that is that we have this built-in mechanism to understand sort of the dominance hierarchy, where we are in the sort of dominance chain, and we can detect other people's vulnerability or other creatures' vulnerability compared to our own. And it's a survival, it's a biological evolutionary kind of thing where, back when we were on the savannah, it would be important for us to be able to instantly sort of assess, can I outrun this, predator, or am I prey or am I predator? And also when we're interacting with someone, well, I want that hunk of meat, but he looks like he's closer to it, and can I clobber him to get that hunk of meat or whatever? So we've got this built-in mechanism for assessing sort of where we are on that scale, and it's a very ancient part of our brain. And in our modern world now, though, what we do is we assess where do I sort of fit in? And instantly we have this sense like, okay, I'm not measuring up. I'm not where I used to be, and I'm not maybe measuring up to the person next to me. And so our brains automatically jump to, okay, like I'm not enough. That's sort of the biological root of it, but it tends to take on sort of an unnecessary, burden in our modern life, where it's like, okay, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not sighted enough. I'm not enough. That's sort of the tape that shame plays in our heads. And the problem is that the way we feel when we're feeling shame is that being vulnerable is just way too dangerous. And we have to protect ourselves, and we have to show that we are not vulnerable. And we have to sort of hide that vulnerability. So, okay, the thing is that being vulnerable is the key, absolutely essential key, to having good connections. And so the other thing is we can't sort of selectively choose to numb that feeling of vulnerability. When we numb our feelings of vulnerability and kind of try and stuff them away, we also numb those feelings of joy and connection and so on. And so we tend to it's sort of like we just sort of close down and close in on ourselves, and it can lead to isolation. So just to kind of give you an example sort of from my own life, because I've been talking about sort of this research and stuff, sort of from my own life. So I can remember as a kid, as my vision deteriorated, and socializing becoming more complex, I, would try to reach out to my peers, and make new friends or whatever. And with my vision, I had sort of a central vision loss, and my eyes, I couldn't directly look at people. I tended to look to the side, and I approach somebody and say, hey, like my brother knows you from blah, blah, blah. Trying to make that contact, and they would say, who are you talking to? And then I'd be like, feel really awkward, embarrassed, and they'd kind of walk away like, oh, that was awkward. And, you have enough of those kinds of experiences, and then you start to, basically say, you know what, that was too awkward and embarrassing. I'm just not going to reach out the next time. And then again, the challenge with that then is that you don't get to practice how to socialize with vision loss. Because again, there's, you can learn different styles, different ways of interacting when you can't see well, but like everything, it takes some practice. And so it's sort of like a challenge. Now, this all sounds kind of negative, but what the positive part is, I mentioned that vulnerability seems to be this place where you feel vulnerable and you feel weak and frightened and so on. But vulnerability is also the birthplace of connection. And how this works is when you feel that you can be vulnerable, that you can show, I'm who I am, I'm not perfect, but I'm here and I'm a decent person and I'm worth connecting with. When you feel that about yourself, you can form very, very strong, very good relationships. And what you can do is just be open about who you are and what you need, and you are able to have very meaningful connections. So, for example, when I was a teenager, I was able to go to Lake Joe. That's a CNIB camp. And I had the opportunity to be with some other people with low vision, some other teenagers. And I just got to, everybody was just sort of fun, like, oh, I can't see it, and it wasn't a big deal. And we got to sort of just be teenagers and have fun and make jokes about the fact that we couldn't see things. And all of a sudden, it just totally opened this door for me that I realized, oh, I'm okay the way I am. And it was just a real door opener. Another sort of, turning point in my life too was that I was a little bit older now, maybe in my 20s. And one of the things, now just to kind of go back a bit, one of the other things that we tend to do when we feel vulnerable and we're not comfortable with that is we try to be perfect. We try to be perfect and we try to, improve ourselves. And so as a young person, I was so committed to just sort of becoming the person that I felt like I wouldn't be ashamed of. So I always wanted to, I wanted to compete and be a great swimmer, because then I felt like finally then I'll be worthy of, people's admiration, or I'll be a great student and then finally I'll be someone. Because right now, with my vision loss, I'm not really anyone. And so I was really striving for all these things, which, bore good fruit on one hand, but it was all coming from this place of like, I'm not worthy enough. I'm not enough. And it's interesting because research has shown that you can divide people into two different groups. One are people who are constantly struggling for that feeling of belonging, that feeling of being enough. And then there are others who just have that. They have that feeling of, look, I'm loved and I belong and it's good. And the research has shown that the only difference between those two groups is that the second group, the only thing that's different about them is they believe that they're worthy of that love and belonging. So this is interesting because this goes back to the brain part again. I was talking about that reptile part of your brain or that ancient part of your brain that sort of assesses where you are on the hierarchy. Well, that's a reality, but there's a higher reality. There's another part of your brain and this is a higher, more evolved part of your brain that understands that we are all interconnected. We are all dependent on one another. And for those of you that sort of have a spiritual sensitivity, perhaps it's even a reality beyond ourselves that we're all equal. We're all worthy of love and belonging. We all have infinite equal worthiness. And when we are connected with that part of ourselves, we can say, okay, I'm not perfect, but I'm worthy of love and belonging. And I can go out there and be vulnerable with, trustworthy people and form these connections, even though I'm not perfect. And nobody's perfect, of course. So that is a wonderful thing to understand about yourself. And I was at this point in my life, so just to get back to my story, I had finished swimming. I had accomplished all these things. I had scholarships and academically successful, and I won medals and swam all over the world and everything. And I was ready to be done my swimming career, and I finished up swimming and retired. And I was like, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to just achieve? And I kind of had this sort of breakdown period of my life. And what I realized through that was that I had all those years I'd been achieving. It had been this striving to become someone that I felt I wasn't yet. So in other words, I was wanting to become worthy, and I didn't feel worthy yet. And I had this experience where I was just sitting by myself and, call it a spiritual awakening. I just sensed that I was okay the way I was, and I always had been, even through all my awkward teenage years, and that again changed my life. And it was like settling into myself. Okay, all of these things, these outside accomplishments, these things that I can show that I've done, that's all great. But it was like I had connected to that core of who I was, where I had really been able to grab onto the fact that I was worthy of being of love and belonging. And that's what I'm really hoping for all of you, that despite some of the challenges that you might face, the things that you're not, are finding maybe more difficult to do now, I could do this, I could do that, now I've lost sight and I'm finding this hard and I have to relearn everything. That can kind of shake you up and make you feel vulnerable. But if you can hold on, if you can find that core of yourself where you're like, yes, these things are difficult, but I am still somebody who's very worthy of being connected with others. And now this is where I'm going to put my CNIB hat on as an employee. And that is that CNIB recognizes the importance of being connected to others when you're going through this vision loss process. And we run peer support groups that help people through that journey as they adjust to vision loss. And it can be a great place to come to go through and kind of in a safe and very welcoming place where you really are welcomed and you really do belong. And you can share some of those experiences and know that you're not alone in the difficulties that you're going through. And you can also, I talked about being at that camp where when I was a teenager, and I just got to, practice socializing in this new way, like learning how to, interact socially without sight. And that's a skill set. And then learn more about different services and supports that are available to me. And then also you can learn and be supported as you work to gain some of those skills, like what Matthew was showing you with the technology. It takes time and effort to learn those things and to have, again, social connections and encouraging a community around you that says, hey, you know what, you did a great job today, bit by bit. You don't have to learn all this stuff all at once, all overnight, to have that group around you that you can rely on. And the other thing is that you can provide support to others. Sometimes it's like, I'm tired. You don't want to be the one who needs the help. You want to be the support to others. And that is actually extremely healthy for you as well. When you're going through difficulty, one of the things that can really lift your spirits is to help someone else. So this is just another reason why being part of a peer support group or a supportive environment is so essential. So I guess that kind of concludes my talk, and that is, just to reiterate that it's so important to stay connected despite some of the challenges that we face, and I hope that you can find that community of support and connectedness. I know the Foundation Fighting Blindness is excellent for that, and I commend them and all the wonderful work that they do, and I also encourage you to reach out to the CNIB. We're starting a peer support group next week, May the 9th, that runs for 6 weeks, 6 Wednesdays in a row, and we'll also be running another one in the fall. And in addition to having the peer support group for the folks who are losing vision or have lost some sight, there's also a simultaneous group for family and spouses, because as you guys know, you go through it with your loved one, and it has its own pressures and stresses, and so to be able to experience that with others who are going through something similar is also excellent. So that is that. I hope I didn't go over, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Thank you so much.